Have you ever read or watched any of the DC or Marvel movies or comics and thought to yourself, I've seen that superhero or supervillain before, but you just can't put a finger on it? Well, it's true there are a lot of similarities between Marvel and DC characters, and it does raise questions about plagiarism. You shouldn't assume that only small, little-known authors are the ones that are guilty of plagiarism, because it's simply not true, and this video is gonna prove that. Today, we're going to tell you about the several incredibly similar DC and Marvel fictional characters, and along the way we'll figure out whether the similarities are simply homage or straight-up plagiarism. Let's get it on! Black Cat.
Meow.
The legend is that Catwoman first appeared in DC's Batman Adventures all the way back in 1940. This supervillain was so memorable and successful amongst DC readers that Catwoman soon became its own solo series. Since then, Catwoman has also appeared in her own full-length movie and various others about Batman. She's also had a romantic relationship with him too. Aww. With the resounding and undeniable success of Catwoman, Marvel could not simply sit back and not create their own. So they created their own female character, Black Cat, with very similar abilities to Catwoman. Black Cat first appeared on our pages in 1979, and she has a lot in common with Batwoman's beloved Catwoman. Firstly, they both have incredible acrobatic abilities, a special connection with cats, and were master thieves. They do have differences that separate them though. One being Catwoman is far better at martial arts than Black Cat. She's also learned a range of disciplines like capoeira, karate, jiu-jitsu, and kung fu. What do you think? Is there a bit of copycat going on here? Hawkeye.
Can't bank with a damn.
In 1941, Green Arrow appeared in DC Comics. He was an alternative to Batman, an excellent fighter, and a skilled archer. Green Arrow put time bombs, nets, flash grenades, and explosives into his arrows, which always hit his desired target.
Wow.
Green Arrow is sort of a Robin Hood in the world of superheroes, but over 20 years later, a very similar character appeared in Marvel Comics. In 1964, we first met Hawkeye in the Tales of Suspense series. At first, he was just a minor villain that no one worried about, but a year later, he joined the Avengers and became a vital member of the Marvel Universe. The similarities between Hawkeye and Green Arrow are uncanny, but what's even funnier, or maybe just creepy, is the fact that both of their loved ones have bird names. Green Arrow has Black Canary and Hawkeye has Mockingbird. Both their girlfriends are spies that are also martial arts experts. A coincidence? I don't think so. Mr. Fantastic. The situation between Elongated Man and Mr. Fantastic is far more complicated than that of others. DC first introduced Elongated Man to fans in 1960, and Mr. Fantastic was introduced in 1961, only 1 year later. Elongated Man was an ordinary man named Ralph Dibny. He got his superhero ability, elasticity, from his extensive knowledge of chemistry, whereas Mr. Fantastic got his powers involuntarily. Mr. Fantastic was exposed to radiation on an unauthorized space mission, the radiation causing his body to mutate, giving him elastic superpowers as a result. Deadpool. Deadpool is one of the most commercially successful Marvel franchises, spawning comics and a movie series. Deadpool's character quickly became iconic across the world, but he didn't appear out of nowhere. He first appeared on the pages of Marvel Comics in 1991. Rob Liefeld and Fabian Nekassar are the ones responsible for Deadpool. And while Rob was showing Fabian his first sketches of Deadpool, Fabian noted the very obvious similarities between Deadpool and Deathstroke from DC. Rob has often spoken about his love for the Teen Titans, and in particular, Deathstroke, and this was his inspiration for Deadpool. Even the names of the characters were almost identical, being Wade Wilson and Slade Wilson. Honestly, it's amazing that the authors have avoided being sued by DC.
Okay guys, let's get out there and make a difference.
Thanos.
Control over the Power Stone.
Everyone knows Thanos. He's one of the great supervillains of both the DC Universe and Marvel Universe. In the DC Universe, however, this title rightfully belongs to Darkseid, a deadly member of a mythical race. The first time the mighty giant Darkseid was seen in comics was way back in 1971. And yeah, you guessed it, 2 years later, we got Thanos. In 1973, in a series about Iron Man comics, fans first met Thanos. He's a member of the race of superhumans called Titanium Eternals, and also has incredible intelligence, telepathy, telekinesis, and of course, he has superhuman strength. The creator of Thanos, James Stalin, has never denied that he got his inspiration from the dark side, but Darkseid's author hasn't batted an eye. Yet. Bullseye. I seriously wonder at this point if DC have copied any characters from Marvel and not vice versa. Bullseye appeared in Marvel Comics in 1976 as the arch-nemesis of Daredevil. Bullseye was inspired by a very similar character from the rival universe, Deadshot. A deadly assassin, Deadshot was also the rival of Batman and first appeared in DC Comics in the 50s, nearly 26 years before we met Bullseye. Both Bullseye and Deadshot are skilled assassins who can hit any target with their incredibly precise attacks. Of course, there are differences between the two, one being Bullseye is far crazier than Deadshot. Swamp Thing. Here's a situation that seems to have been an accident. You could say this proved that artists sometimes just happen to get similar ideas, so rushing to accuse someone of plagiarism isn't something we should do anymore. Both Swamp Thing and Man-Thing made their debut in 1971, within just 2 months of each other. This time it's Marvel who beat DC to it. Swamp Thing and Man-Thing are incredibly similar. They both have huge bodies made entirely of plants, and any plant matter can become a part of their bodies, so they're basically invincible. Both characters live in swamps, and they both used to be ordinary scientists who became monsters because of their risky experiments. The Hulk. Hulk was inspired by Frankenstein and the novel Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He's appeared in Marvel Comics since the early 60s and somewhat resembles that of a DC villain Solomon Grundy, who fans met in the mid-40s. In this case, however, Hulk and Solomon Grundy only share similarities in terms of looks. They're both giants with strange colors of skin, and they're both impossible to kill because of their super strength. Both Hulk and Solomon Grundy have alter egos, but the difference is Solomon doesn't remember a thing about his past life, while Hulk lives in the body of Bruce Banner, an insanely smart scientist. Did you know that the Hulk was initially gray in color, but it was later decided to make him green because there were issues with the first printed publication, Vision. Another two heroes that appeared basically simultaneously in our screens is Red Tornado from DC and Vision from Marvel. Red Tornado made his debut only a couple of months after Vision, but it clearly wasn't plagiarism. It would be impossible for DC, Marvel, or anyone for that matter to create a brand new character from scratch and publish a whole comic book in just 2 months. However, these characters' stories are almost identical. They were both created to be supervillains, but then swap sides to be superheroes. They're also able to feel human emotions, and they both look like androids. Sometimes there's a simple explanation for why these things happen. For example, it's not unheard of for artists to work for 2 companies at the same time. Atomic Skull. Finally, here's proof that Marvel isn't the only one that gets its inspiration from the work of colleagues. In 1978, a brand new antagonist burst into the Superman comics. His name was Atomic Skull. Atomic Skull had a very distinct look about him. He looked like a skeleton with a flaming skull, and he'd wear a leather suit. Does any of that ring a bell? It might, because 6 years before that, in 1972, Marvel had already introduced Ghost Rider into the Marvel Universe. There are already heaps of visual similarities between the 2 characters, but the parallels end there, because Atomic Skull is a supervillain with radioactive powers, and Ghost Rider looks the way he does after making a deal with the devil in order to save someone's life. Surely you're tired of watching videos about animals and heartwarming stories. You probably need something to get the blood pumping, like cool cars and robots. So if you do, subscribe to our channel, because we're waiting for you to come to the dark side.